Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Town of Stony Plains Governance and Priorities meeting for this beautiful Tuesday, was it April 6th. I hope everybody had a good Easter long weekend. Personally, I had a good chance to kind of rest a little bit, so which is enjoyable. Hope you guys all had a chance to enjoy some time with your family. Again, make sure members that are participating to make sure your mics are on mute if you're not speaking. Again, please text me so that I can have a speaking order for those that would like to participate. And as always, our recording secretary will be counting the votes and lowering the hands after any vote that may be required. Okay. With that, Deputy Mayor, with the motion, please.
Yes, Your Worship and Council. The Town Council adopt the April 6, 2021 Governance and Priorities meeting agenda as presented.
Thank you much, Deputy Mayor. I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Mr. Mayor, that's 7 hands in favor.
Thank you very much. Move on to number 3 of our agenda is public input session. This is a fully virtual meeting, so everybody's watching via YouTube through the town's channel. Town manager, has anybody submitted anything to be read publicly into the public input session?
Thank you, Your Worship. At this point in time, we have not been notified by any member of the public wishing to participate in the public input session.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to the next one is number 4 is presentations and delegations, and today we have one presentation, and it is the quarterly update from the Rcmp. So I believe Inspector Loken is joining us today. Inspector Loken, please turn on your mic and your video, and you may start whenever you're ready.
Good evening, everyone. Just making sure that you can hear me before I start talking too much. Okay. First, I see that the crime stats have been projected onto your screen. I've sent those in for your review, obviously subject to any questions that you may have. Now, what I've just a little bit of information on how to interpret these. It shows what these statistics are for is January to February over the last 5 years. So for example, 2017, that would include the months of January and February, as do 2018, 2019, 2020. So it's a comparator between just those 2 months of each year. And so when we look at statistics, it's interesting from one year to the next in terms of whether we're going up or whether we're going down. And it suggests that obviously it's better to be going down than it is to be going up. Sometimes there are anomalies where the statistics will rise. There may be an apparent reason or an unknown reason for that. I would suggest that probably one of the most common reasons for it, if you look at, say, the first couple lines, homicide, robbery, sexual assault, the numbers typically are fairly low. So any variance in those numbers will cause a big percentage change. So, but if you look at assaults, for example, that's probably one of the most common persons crimes where the numbers are, there are a few others. Where there are a larger number. And if you look at the percentage change of 2020 versus 2021, the months of January, February, we are down 41%. If you look at, and what I started to say earlier was over the 5-year average, I think that's the more important number rather than the year to year. It's are we seeing this trend go up or are we seeing it go down? And so according to the statistics, assaults in the town of Stony Plain over the past 5 years have been are down 39%. And so the other larger numbers in that category are criminal harassment, which can be anything from stalking behavior to harassing people. That's down, it's up 100%. But when you look at the numbers, 7 in 2017 versus 14 in 2021, that's an increase of 7 incidents. And so we're actually down 30%, and then uttering threats is the other persons category. But overall, all persons offenses are down 4% over the 5-year term and are down 24% this year over last year. So I'll move on to property crime, and probably one or some of the areas of most interest or concern to the public and to council would be break and enters, theft of motor vehicles, and other thefts. And so the break and enters have, according to these stats, are down 7% since over the last 5 years. And over the period of since this time last year, we've seen an increase in the 1 year period of 8%. But when you look at the numbers themselves, that's an increase of one instance from 13 to 14. Thefts of motor vehicles, no change from 2020 to 2021, but the 5-year trend suggests a 47% decrease in thefts of motor vehicles. And now I know that some naysayers of these statistics do say that people have stopped reporting, people have stopped calling the police because they feel that there's no evidence or they feel that nothing will be done. But I would suggest, say, for the example of thefts of motor vehicles, who's not going to call the police when their vehicle is stolen? Vehicles are worth thousands of dollars, and even if they just want to go through insurance, one of the requirements is that you report it to the police. So that is a statistic that I'm fairly confident is fairly accurate. And like I said, over the 5-year trend is a 47% decrease. Frauds are probably the biggest increase that I see, and those are 45% up over the last 5 years. Now, some of the frauds, that's reported frauds and not actual incidents, or it can be attempts as well. So I'm sure that many of you, as I do, even on my work phone, get those calls saying that my social insurance number has been compromised, or that Canada Revenue Agency is coming with a warrant for my arrest. That would be included in that category, and absolutely we have seen an increase in those calls to the public over the last 5 years. But again, all encompassing, total property crimes themselves are decreased of 28% over the last 5 years, or a 9% decrease over this time last year. And so overall, all criminal code taken into account, over the past 5 years, we've seen a decrease of 8%, and from last year to this year is a decrease of 18%. I think that I've gone on quite a bit at length about these stats, but if there's obviously any questions in relation to them, I'll do my best to answer them for you. Something that's not on here that I did get a statistic, because I think it's of interest right now, is Mental Health Act calls. We have seen over the last 5 years an increase of 97% and a 40% increase over last year at this time. And that kind of allows me to segue into some other information that I have that I was able to find out what caseload that the police are working on in relation to the town of Stony Plain. And I've got two different stats. One is estimated workload, and one is estimated frequency, or the frequency, I should say, which is the number of times that we have these incidents reported. And interestingly enough, the top 10 file by workload, at the top of that list is mental health calls. And so I know that it does take a considerable amount of time for our officers. Obviously, it is a health issue, and often we get called ourselves, or EMS would get called, depending on the circumstance. But I would say the majority of the time, the police would have to go in prior to EMS or another mental health worker, just to ensure that the scene is safe, because we have to remember that sometimes the scene has deteriorated to the point where the police need to be called, so it's potentially unsafe for somebody else that's not trained in this type of situation to go in and deal with it. So the biggest issue that we deal with is mental health, followed by breaching of conditions, then mischief, then failure to attend court. And if you look at assaults, that's right down near the sixth most, where we spend, it's sixth on the list rather than number one. And so under frequency of the calls that we receive, the number one is mischief. That can include everything from property damage to what's called preventing the lawful enjoyment of property. So depending on where that call falls, but under the frequency, those are the most calls that we get in the town of Stony Plain. And the second most frequent call in the town of Stony Plain is mental health calls, followed by suspicious person. And I can provide a more detailed report to council if they so desire. I can forward it to Carl, and he can pass it on to you if there's interest in that. But I won't comment on it any further in this actual meeting. Now, just in looking at our file count on what we've done for calls of, now the numbers that I'm about to give you are calls for service as well as self-generated calls by the police. In 2019, there were 6,427 calls, or files opened, I should say, within the town of Stony Plain. And in 2020, there was a reduction down to 4873. I've got a 5-year timeline, but again, if I provide this report to you, all those statistics would be included in there. And then the final thing that I'll speak to in relation to that is, interestingly enough, the most calls, the busiest months that we had last year was actually not only last year, in 2019 and 2020, the busiest months that we had was January and June. Now, in looking at when calls are reported, I wouldn't say that I'm a little bit skeptical, but obviously the results can sometimes be skewed. For example, we see a lot of motor vehicle collisions being reported on Monday morning at 9 o'clock, and I would suggest that that's more likely because people are attending the detachment to report those versus the actual event occurring at that time. So when I say that Saturday is our busiest day for calls of service, I'm fairly confident that that's accurate, but there are some, like I said, anomalies. For instance, matters that can wait for people to report that they would probably report when the front counter service is open at the detachment. So those results would be skewed in that regard. Now, one thing in relation to crime that I wanted to speak to is there were a significant number of mailbox entries and thefts over particularly the Christmas season. And I want to advise that there are a number of investigative avenues that we can take and a number of pieces of equipment that we can deploy in relation to that. We did do that. We had a recovery of some mail. We did not have a lot of success in actually identifying those responsible, although we did identify some responsible, and even though we didn't have enough evidence to charge, the thefts seemed to kind of drop off after they were confronted by us. But just know that that is something that's on the forefront of our minds, and particularly in the Christmas season coming up each year, we see an increase of those, and that will be an area that we're looking at. Now, one other thing that I wanted to comment on is visibility in the community, and I will speak to our annual performance plan shortly, but I want to assure you that visibility in the community and particularly in the town of Stony Plain is a part of that performance plan that we have in having actual reportable goals of through our management of doing patrols within the town of Stony Plain. Now, I'll just speak a little bit as to COVID. I know that I've spoken to it at the last couple of meetings. COVID is a unique year. People are not themselves. We do appreciate the public, the compliance that we and enforcement services have. A lot of people are becoming frustrated, and a lot of people are looking for the end of this, as are we. But keep in mind that treat others as how you'd want to be treated. Now, at our front counter, we have kept our front counter open with our regular member complement as well. We have been able to maintain service delivery to the public. Our front counter is open, and we're providing all the services that we have been. I know some detachments in the Edmonton area and throughout Alberta do not have their front counter open and do not have a restriction on some of the services that they're providing, but we've found ways to work with this, and I can say that the new building that we have here in particular has contributed to that, because we do have the space and the ability to have a large area in our front entrance to accommodate smaller number of people in a large area. So it certainly does contribute to that. Some of the initiatives that we have implemented here at the detachment, I can thank COVID for that, because it has given us the latitude to streamline some of our processes. I think that would normally take a fair amount of time and red tape in our organization, but we've been given the latitude, providing that we come up with unique ways of maintaining service delivery to the public. So we have certainly recognized some efficiencies within our own detachment. And lastly, I'll speak to our APP, or annual performance plan. We have 3 initiatives on it that we are looking very much the same as last year, because I think they work, and I think that the goals and measurables that we have are realistic, and they are what is on the minds of the public and our councils and the police officers themselves. The first one is employee wellness, and I think that everybody would agree that a happy, healthy employee is a productive employee with more attendance at work and more job satisfaction. So I won't go into that in great detail, but we have taken on a number of initiatives here at the detachment to make that a priority. Another, the second initiative that we've implemented is community engagement. And during COVID, it again has been a unique time in maintaining that connection with the public. And obviously, personal meetings, the different initiatives that we had, particularly under the community policing umbrella, we've either had to modify or cancel some of those. But this meeting, for example, where we're meeting via Zoom, we've come up with a lot of different initiatives where we can have an online presence with people. We have a program that's being developed with the schools right now to have presentations by our police officers to them without actual attendance at in their classrooms. And then the third, and probably the most at the forefront of most people's minds, is crime reduction. And a number of things are being implemented. Like I said, targeted patrols of certain areas identified by our analysts and through members of the public who call in to report concerns, areas of concern. I know that almost on a daily basis, we receive emails that go out to the entire detachment that come from members of the public who are advising of suspicious activity or break-in-enters in certain places, or cars speeding around in the middle of the night. Those are sent to all members, including the traffic unit that we have based out of here, to keep an eye on those areas and increase their patrols when they're out late at night. people might not necessarily see them because they are out. We do work 24 hours a day, unlike some detachments that have a period of on-call. We are 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So I guess the only other thing that I would say that we do have our plainclothes units, and two of those units within the plainclothes units are the crime reduction unit and the drug unit. And being that drugs and property crime are typically tied close together, one feeds the other, those two units do work together a lot, and we have had some good successes in the last year. We fully anticipating having more, and look forward to serving the community. That's my presentation, pending any questions from council.
Thank you very much, Inspector Loken, for the presentation, and it's good to see the numbers, and appreciate the work that you are doing with our detachment and leading our forces. I just wanted to say thank you for a few of your members came out and helped us with the fire we had about a week and a half ago. They did some detouring and make sure that the community was safe as our firefighters put out the fire and make sure that building was secure before people were allowed back in. So thank you very much for that. I think, let me just check. Oh, Councillor Bennett messaged me. So before I go to Councillor Bennett, just one question regarding the chart that you have provided for us. Is some of them have NA, non-applicable, and one of the obvious ones is the mischief, damage, etc. It was 0 in 2017, but 29 in 2021. But the 5-year average is NA. Can you explain that? Like, to me, it looks like it should have been like 3,000% or 29,000% increase. You're on mute, Inspector.
My apologies. I would suggest that when there's a 0, particularly on something as prevalent as mischief, that and in this case, I believe that there is a change in what's called the scoring of our electronic file management system, and it's a new code or a new specific way to capture that particular offense. And so just in looking at these stats, that stat wouldn't have been able to be captured in that way, the current way that they do it, until 2020. So the previous years, they probably had a different code that was that's no longer in existence, and for whatever reason, they do change those, and sometimes those do cause those anomalies. But that's what that would be from. It's definitely not that there was no mischief prior to 2020, and all of a sudden we have an increase. It's just a change in the file management system.
Thank you. Councillor Bennett, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Inspector Loken. Welcome to our meeting tonight. It's always good to have you reporting and updating us on what our Rcmp are doing. So my question, if we could go back to the mental health calls, the question I have is, could you explain to me when a mental health call comes in, what's the procedure? Is it just the Rcmp that goes out, or are there other services that go out with you? I know you said something about the ambulance and but I wasn't quite clear on that. So I'm wondering, does victim services go out at the same time? Do any kind of social workers go out at the same time? Can you just clarify that for me, please?
Absolutely. Good question. Mental health calls can come in a variety of ways. They can be initiated by a concerned family member or a friend who can go directly to the police. They can call 911 and their complaint is directed to EMS. They can go see a physician, or they can get a court order that would initiate the process, and then the police would be called to come in and assist in effecting that order. And so sometimes the police are attending those themselves, and particularly, there are calls that come in the middle of the night, and because we are a 24-hour service provider, sometimes the supports that you would typically see maybe during the daytime, you wouldn't see in the middle of the night. That said, as I spoke to before, sometimes, depending on the situation, the police would have to attend prior to ensure that the scene is safe, or to get the situation under control before the other people involved in mental health would come. Now, there are situations where social workers and other mental health workers would attend with the police. Many times the police are called. We would take that person into custody under the Mental Health Act, and we would transport them to a facility that can make that assessment or that determination, the mental health experts in that area. And we do have a unit called RPAC, and that unit has been, I'm not sure what the proper term would be, fluctuating levels of operation over the past several years. And I know that we are, when I say we, the RCMP are in discussion right now of having, and what an RPAC team is, it's typically a police officer and a mental health or social worker to attend calls together, and they ride in the same vehicle, and they would go to these calls together. And typically these would be particularly the ones that we would have more of a heads up on, or that would have an added level of requirement for somebody like that to attend. And so these RPAC teams cover the area based around Edmonton. So we do share these resources with other detachments. Now, just anecdotally, I've been told by people in RPAC that our detachment area is one of the biggest users of this program. And so it only makes sense to me, and we are in discussions right now to have the RPAC unit based out of our detachment. And again, I know that I keep singing praises about the new building that we have here, but that's another advantage that we have, is had we been in the old detachment, I wouldn't be able to have those discussions. Whereas now, I can certainly submit that, and they are in the consideration phase of basing that unit out of here, because we absolutely do have the room, and everyone knows that when a unit is based out of a certain building, that they would probably enjoy the better service delivery than the other places. So I'm really advocating for that unit to be based out of here, and hopefully by next council meeting, I'll have some definitive news on that. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes, it definitely does. Thank you. And Mr. Mayor, if I could just follow up. Um, so could you make a note to update us on that during the next briefing, the next input? Um, I would be really interested in knowing if we get that service to come into our detachment. And yeah, I'm really interested in that whole procedure of what happens. So thank you very much for that information.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Moving over to Councillor Matties. Go ahead, Councillor Matties.
Thank you. Good evening, Inspector Loken. Thank you so much for your presentation. I have a couple of questions. The first one was from Councillor Bennett's question, which was regards to the RPAC. Can you tell me what that acronym stands for, or I've heard of it, but I'm not sure.
I knew that somebody was going to ask me that, and I'm the worst person with acronyms. I can.
Oh,
I
well,
can
that's
find,
okay. If you
I,
could bring
I,
that
I,
next time.
I think I know most of it, but I'll get a definitive answer and I'll send it to Carl and send it to you.
Great, thank you so much. My second question is with regards to the sexual assaults and other sexual offenses. I I don't know if you had mentioned anything about that, but I did notice, for example, with the sexual assaults, they doubled in 2 months from 2 to 4, and then other sexual offenses. So I'm not sure what other sexual offenses are, number one. And then secondly, do you know the annual number of sexual assaults we had in 2020, for example? Because it seems quite concerning that if we went from 2 to 4, if we have 4 every 2 months, that's a fairly huge rise.
Mm-hmm. So first of all, sexual assault by definition is anything from an unwanted, inappropriate touch that's sexual in nature, all the way to the extreme end of the sexual assault, which include in our criminal code we don't use the word rape, but sexual assault would include rape of an individual as well, and so. The sexual assault would be that particular section under the criminal code of, I believe it's 271 of sexual assault. Other sexual offenses would be the sexual offenses that sometimes accompany sexual assaults, but sometimes are like, for example, a person in authority or sexual exploitation, sexual interference, what else do I have? Just there's other incidents of sexual assault, or sorry, not sexual assault, but other sexual offenses under the criminal code that wouldn't necessarily meet the criteria or the definition of the touching and the sexual assault under section 271 of the criminal code. That's where that would fall. Sorry, I'm just bouncing around a little bit in terms of RPACT. I know that I'm going to get it wrong. It's something in regional police and crisis team, something like that. But I'm sure that I'm getting the A wrong. It probably stands for something else. But now, further to your question about the sexual assaults, you're right. Over the course of a 2-month period, that is a fair jump. But and obviously, don't take my comments as minimizing whatsoever. But a 100% increase is an increase of 2 sexual assaults. Obviously, we'd like to see the number at 0, but 2 isn't an alarming number, considering that these are reported sexual assaults and doesn't necessarily mean that they are chargeable offenses. It's victims come forward and report a number of incidents whenever. What am I trying to say here? Sorry, I apologize. I just lost my train of thought. But back to the actual numbers themselves, the increase. One of the reasons that I can see that occurring is, I believe I discussed it at the last meeting, but I'm not sure, is that something that we were concerned about, or that we were potentially seeing, is that victims no longer had the ability or the frequency of contact with some of the typical means of support that they would have to either be encouraged to or to actually report incidents of sexual assault. They may be, and this goes along with domestic violence as well, because a large number of our domestic violence cases are associated to sexual assaults. And so I think with now, as of today, I think restrictions are going, a little higher, but we have seen a lessening of restrictions in some areas. And so I would suggest that the means of people being able to report those, whether it be to a school resource officer, a friend that you would happen to see in the park or an outdoor gathering, or to go for coffee with, or something like that. versus not being able to report it at all. But I do have a better somewhat of a snapshot for you for sexual assaults over the course of last year and over the 5-year span. Sexual assaults over 2019 versus 2020, it was a 26% decrease. And again, like I said, sometimes statistics can apparently mean certain things, but when you think about the reasoning behind them and what's actually happened, it can also be concerning. So I mean, even though we saw a 26% decrease in reported sexual assaults, 2019 versus 2020, it doesn't necessarily mean that there are fewer taking place. It might mean that the mechanism for people to report those has been somewhat limited. But then also, if people aren't having the interactions that they used to, going to parties, social interactions, congregating in groups at social functions, the opportunity might not be there as well. So, but just to give you an idea, 2019 versus 2020, 26% reduction. The 5-year average saw a 27% increase from 2016 to 2020. And you're wondering about actual numbers. 2020, we had 14 sexual assaults reported versus 2019, 19 reported. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does very much. And Your Worship, I just have one other quick question. Can I proceed?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, my next question is with regards to the number of total calls. You said in 2019 there was 6,422 calls, and in 2021 there was 4,873, if I heard correctly, which is a 25% decrease in calls. Is that correct? And can you tell me why you think that is, and what do you think will happen in the future post-COVID?
Right, and well, what I can tell you is that over the past 5 years, and I can give you the actual numbers if you want to hear them, 2016 to 2020, we have been seeing a slow, steady increase in calls for service. Obviously, with increasing population, that would be expected. So in 2016, it was, I'll round these calls to the nearest 100, but in 2016, 5,100, in 2017, 5,700, in 2018, 6,100, and in 2019, 6,400. Now in 2020, as you have pointed out, it was 4,873. Now, just on the apparent face of it, and something that we've discussed at the senior management team here, is that 2020 has been an anomaly for many things, and particularly in statistics. I don't know how much attention we should pay to 2020 statistics, just because it, although important, it was a unique year, and there were a lot of variables that aren't present in other years, and assuming that we will be going back to some sense of normality with the vaccine rollout, hopefully in the near future, we would expect 2020 and probably 2021 to be unique years, and I would expect that our calls for service would go up. Like I said, people aren't interacting the way that they were, and although there are some increases in calls for, you know, some calls to houses for disturbances within the house itself, people aren't interacting with others the way that they typically do. They're not going out and socializing. There's less drinking. There's a number of reasons due to COVID, I think, that would contribute to that. So if I was to just make an educated assumption on what the cause of it, I would say that 2020 is a unique year, and once things are somewhat back to normal, you will see those numbers go up again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Mattis, anything else?
Well, that's everything. Thank you so much.
Thank you for answering that question, and because I had one of those questions about, you know, how has COVID affected the number of calls, and I think you just answered that quite well, Inspector Loken. Thank you, appreciate that. We'll move on to Councillor Laurie, please. Go ahead, Councillor Laurie.
Your Worship, and thank you, Inspector, for the presentation. A lot of the questions that I had have somewhat been answered already, and I did just want to bring to light, you kind of talked about the mischief damage to property, and I look at the category below it is the mischief other, and I see it had quite a significant number in 2017 through 2019 before we see numbers in the mischief damage to property. So I'm assuming that at some point in time, the damage to property got split out of that other category. And when you kind of look at the numbers combined, it sort of gives you closer numbers to the year prior. So nice to see it getting defined a little bit more. I think that's where we're seeing it. I had two questions. I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday, or not yesterday, sorry, the other day, in regards to the detachment, and they were asking about the surface area of the detachment, and I tried to find it, and I couldn't. And so I was wondering if there'd be any way that you could provide us with a map of the detachment area. I wasn't able to find it anywhere on either your website or our website. And then I had a question in regards to the crime mapping. I noticed that on the crime mapping right now, it's only showing, I think, 3 instances in the town of Stony Plain from, I think they were March 29th. And I'm just wondering what the time frame of that crime mapping update is, like how long information stays on there. And then the last question is just in regards to fraud. Obviously, you know, we're all aware that the fraud cases are increasing and those robocalls are increasing exponentially. And being that we have a significant seniors population, I'm just wondering if there's anything in respect to community messaging that the local detachment is doing or that the town could be doing or helping with to ensure we're trying to educate people as best as possible so we see less people falling victims to the fraud in our community.
Absolutely. In terms of the detachment service area, we go from Edmonton city limits on our eastern boundary all the way to almost Seba Beach, and then the North Saskatchewan River is our southern boundary, and then our northern boundary does it's kind of jagged across the top and it goes up and down. So, I mean, an actual map would probably be best to, I mean, I know where I can find it specifically, and that's within our own intranet. But as far as for the public, I'll find an actual a link, or I'll find a scanned copy of our detachment boundaries that I can send to Carl to distribute. And in terms of crime mapping, you said that you saw 3 from March 29th on there. Now, those statistics are typically updated every day by our analyst. He feeds those results in every day. My understanding is they stay on there for a month and then they refresh themselves. So I'm not sure if that answers that question. And then in terms of frauds and the robocalls and everything like that, and it's so frustrating to us to see people fall victim to this. And you're absolutely right that it seems like every year we do some education in regards to this, but obviously, you know, we need to continue with that, because I think a lot of people are aware that, you know, if you have a call, particularly from Canada Revenue Agency, or somebody that's looking for your bank information, that you should ask some questions and push it a little further. And if you're ever in doubt, ask them for a callback number. And you know that we need to do some more public education. It's heartbreaking to see, particularly with senior citizens who sometimes lose large money, large amounts of their savings. Through to some of these scammers. And you know, in terms of the CRA calls that people get saying that a warrant has been or will be issued for your arrest, we had, and this is some time ago, but we had an elderly couple that received one of those calls and obviously took it very seriously, and couldn't sleep the entire night, stayed up all night thinking that they were going to jail for some reason, and actually dressed up in their Sunday best with their suit and dress, and came to the detachment in the morning to turn themselves in. Thankfully, they had not forwarded any personal information or banking information to these people, but it's just, like I said, it's heartbreaking and it's disgusting that the most vulnerable people in our society fall victim to that. But at the same time, absolutely right. I know that we do have projects for every new cadet that comes in from the training academy that's assigned to our detachment. And some of those assignments that they've received have been in that area, because I know that people do need reminding that they need to follow up on this information and make sure that it's legitimate. Another program that I've seen in other areas that we were setting up, and I'm not sure what stage it's at right now, but some of these fraudsters will ask people to pay them either in Bitcoin or in iTunes gift cards or another form of payment in gift cards. And so we were working with local businesses to educate their staff that if somebody comes in and they are buying a large number of these gift cards, to question that and maybe give them a pamphlet of what this could potentially be. Now, these fraudsters are very good because they have anticipated that, and what they do is they will tell these people that this is to protect your account, and there are people on the inside working in these stores. So if anybody asks you what it's for, tell them this, and they'll actually give them a story of what to tell the people in the stores. So it is difficult to stay a step ahead of them. We even have had the fraudsters scour our local news to see some names that have been in the paper. For example, one of our school resource officers his name was used to legitimize or an attempt to legitimize this person calling around telling people that they needed to give money, and using the name of one of our constables here. And they actually met up with the person in a local parking lot. And again, they've got these extravagant stories of why you shouldn't go to the front counter at the police, or why you shouldn't ask somebody about this because the integrity of this super secret investigation they're doing will be compromised. But it's yeah, in a nutshell, I know that I've kind of gone on at length about this, but it is certainly an area that I do see a need to continue education to the public in regards to that. Absolutely.
Thank you. Anything else, Councillor Laurie?
No, appreciate that. I think I had the boundaries mostly right, and it was that that northern boundary that was kind of fooling with me a little bit. So maybe seeing a map of that would help. So appreciate that. And yeah, with the fraud again, I know it's something I've seen the signs at our local Safeway and that about buying the gift cards and that kind of stuff. And unfortunately, I have talked to a couple of seniors in the area who have fallen victim to it, and it's upsetting. It'd be great if we could stop it all, but I think as long as we're putting our best effort forward, that's fantastic, and I'm really glad to hear that your recruits work on those type of projects. So I look forward to seeing some more of those to come. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Laurie. Okay, moving on to Councillor Meyer. Go ahead. You have a couple questions.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. And just to Councillor Laurie and to Inspector Loken's comments, I now when I get the scams, I take time to attempt a little shaming of them, and I ask them to pray with me for their souls, and I seek to maybe impart a little bit of shame on them. And if nothing else, I'm at least slowing them down. But my question is, so in regards to my question, so this past weekend, I was out buying wine for my Easter dinner at one of our local liquor stores, not far from one of our cannabis stores as well. And it reminded me, I should say, I was actually sort of surprised at the number of youths that were waiting in cars in that parking lot, and just the nature of the strip mall there. There's not any great reason for them to be in that parking lot, other than, I suspect, waiting to procure some adult beverages, and I also suspect some cannabis. Anyhow, it reminded me of a question I asked you about a year after the legalization of cannabis, in regards to a rumor I had heard that it had seen an uptick in the amount of underage booting that was occurring. And I was just curious if you had any insights now that it's been a few years after legalization, and also just in regards to how that type of how that enforcement is done in regards to checking IDs, and how do we make sure our I'm not sure what the phrase is, how I group those two businesses, but how we make sure that they're doing their end of the business and checking IDs.
Yeah, good question. And obviously, like, I mean, I think I've said it a number of times over the last few years. The police are only as good as the people that they serve. And this is kind of like when you just said that about a number of youth in the parking lot of these establishments. I mean, it's not surprising to me, but at the same time, I haven't heard that raised as a concern before. But absolutely, that is an area that we can pass on to the watches to do, you know, their patrols, and maybe if they have some paperwork, go park in one of the parking lots on a Saturday night or something like that. Now, in terms of like now that we are some time down the road after legalization, we haven't seen, you know, as far as people, I don't know if you call it pulling or booting for booze or for weed. You know, we get the odd call, but I would suggest that we haven't heard of it as a huge problem in youth. Not to say that it doesn't happen; it absolutely does. But I don't know if it's increased any more than it used to. There are still people that go to through the typical means that they did prior to legalization, going through other sellers that don't have storefronts. And but obviously, we'll have a look at that. And you know, I would encourage council and even members of the public who are listening, that if they do see areas of concern, to report that to us, because AGLC oversees that as well. And if, I mean, obviously, we as the police do have the ability to enforce that and to keep an eye on that. But if it looks like there's a particular problem in a certain area or with a certain store, we can ask AGLC to come in and do some investigations. Like I said, whether it be specific to a particular business or whether it be just in an area. But I know that they do have a number of means for investigation as well with their own people.
Thank you very much. You had a second question, Councillor Meyer?
I do, and I you know, I hesitate to bring it up, but since you did mention community visibility, it's more a comment, though. I'll say, you know, I've been following the Grace Life Church story fairly closely, and I wanted to say thank you to you and your members for the level of professionalism that is shown. I'm sure we can all agree that it's a difficult situation, and the optics of having to arrest pastors is never a good story. So, but I did want to say I do appreciate your guys' calm and measured response.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Meyer. And Inspector Loken, I think that is all the messages that I have of speaking order. But let me just ask you a question about, I think you mentioned about visibility in the community, etc. Since we've built a new detachment, and definitely you've said many times our members are very thankful for that, and it's, you know, boosted morale and the overall happiness and wellness of our members. In terms of response times and all that stuff, has your detachment noticed any differences in the service levels to our Stony Plain residents?
I would suggest that response times are still very quick. Obviously, the location of the building has had an effect on the town of Stony Plain, because it used to be that we were the epicenter of policing based out of Stony, and now we are, you know, the epicenter of our activity is based out of the western edge of Spruce Grove. Now, many times, like we have looked at we do have a live map of the cars and the GPS that we can refer to. And I look at that just to ensure that, we are giving equal service throughout the communities that we serve. And I mean, I'm not saying that we're perfect, but I have been relatively satisfied with the level of coverage that we're able to provide with the number of people that we have. And like I said when I spoke about the annual performance plan that we have in one of the areas of crime reduction, one of the specific initiatives that we have is visibility. And I have heard your concerns expressed at past council meetings about the change in location of the building and what that would mean to the residents of Stony Plain. And that has absolutely been taken into account, and that we are impressing upon the members that, rather than going from point A to point B to the call that you have to attend in Stony Plain, obviously, if it's a level of urgency, you go directly to the call. But if in your comings and goings, if there's another route that you can take, or in your in the patrols during the times that you're not responding directly to calls for service, that we do give Stony Plain the appropriate amount of patrol time as we do in other areas too.
Okay, thank you, and I appreciate hearing that. And again, I think one of our previous engagements with you during the presentation, I think one of the members of council asked, and you mentioned that quite clearly, that the members are asked to be more visible in our community, such as if you're gassing up, come to Stony Plain. If you're doing something else, drive through Stony Plain. And personally, I've seen members in the evening and throughout the day in Stony Plain as I've moved about the community. And actually, I've had two instances where we needed Rcmp, and they were there fairly quick. Both of them, the alarms went off, and they were there before I was. So definitely a good response time, personally, what I've noticed. So definitely thank you for that. I do have a question from Councillor Plechko. He's having some internet issues, and he's wondering and asking about staffing levels. One of those things that we always talk about is a stress leave, paternal leave, maternal leave, and getting the equivalent number of staffing that the town of Stony Plain has requested. How are we with that right now?
We are sitting fairly well right now in terms of support staff that the town of Stony Plain has. We've historically we've done very well with that. I don't want to get into specifics about people's health issues, but we do see a very good number of our people attending work regularly with very few sick leave days. And that's for the actual municipal employees of the town of Stony Plain support staff. In the regular member complement, I know that I always discuss the ebb and flow of resources that we see. And obviously, we would like to see the high tide of those resources being in the summer months when we're typically the busiest. And I think that this summer coming into it, we are looking fairly good. We have had a number of new members come into the detachment. We've got very few vacancies. I don't believe that we have any constable vacancies right now. We've got a number of corporal vacancies. I think is 3 right now. But there is a current competition right now that we are looking at the names of the people who have applied for that, and as well as 2 sergeant positions as well that have been advertised for people to put in for. And I'd just like to say, I know that I keep talking about the new building, but considering that our detachment has this new building and has a number of amenities, is the location in proximity to the city of Edmonton, combined with Stony Plain and Spruce Grove being very good communities. In fact, a number of police officers and employees of the Rcmp that work in Edmonton choose to live in this area. So our detachment is very attractive to having good competition for these positions when they do come open. And something that we've done, like when the previous OIC, before I had this position, was in place, me and him developed a really good relationship with our HR department out of K Division, and we saw the need to have regular meetings that, because if you're known and if you have that relationship with them, then obviously you're going to get more attention than some places that don't have that relationship. And so we've got a very good relationship with our HR department in the city, and so we do have regular meetings on even forecasting vacancies coming up, whether it be due to Matt and Pat leave, transfers, things like that, and we were able to accurately forecast vacancies, and typically on the full-time employee positions that we have, we never run hot, for lack of a better term. Like we don't typically run over, but we do typically run very close to capacity, especially compared to other detachments.
Thank you much. Appreciate that. No other members of council have messaged in, so I guess those are all the questions we have. Again, on behalf of our community and our council, thank you much for the work that you guys do. I know personally I sleep better at night knowing that you guys are on the watch and you know, taking care of our community and their safety or needs. Maybe one question before you leave. I don't know if you want to answer this or not. Let's just throw it out there. We see the provincial government talking about a provincial police force. Currently, we have a contract with the Rcmp, which provides the services for our community. I have not yet seen a need to change that. A few years ago, Town of Stony Plain met with a few other communities that had their own municipal police force, and we went through the whole gamut of the pluses and negatives and all the good stuff that we need to consider. And it was deemed that we have the best service for the best price that we need for our residents right now. What are the thoughts about having a provincial police force to, you know, come replace the Rcmp?
Mm-hmm. Well, obviously, I have a biased opinion, but you know, just based on my more than 24 plus years experience in the organization, I've seen in a number of different. I've worked in a number of different provinces, and without. I have to be careful on how much I say, but I would suggest that for the dollar that's paid, that municipalities get the best bang for their buck with the Rcmp. There are a number of services that come along with us, and the infrastructure that backs that as well. Particularly, like I said, in the town of Stony Plain, the city of Spruce Grove, and Parkland County, we do have that excellent relationship with HR, and our positions are filled. And so the number of positions, I know that that's often an argument, is that we don't have the ability to fill these positions, but in our detachment, these positions are filled, the number of positions that are allotted to us. And if you kind of get the policing that you want to pay for, and the Rcmp is one of the cheaper options. Now, I could really get into the weeds on personal opinion, but I'll just leave it that I think that the wisest choice financially and service delivery wise, the Rcmp is the best option.
Okay, thank you for that. And you know, you mentioned something right there at the end there where you say you get what you pay for, and I think the town of Stony Plain has been very cognizant of making sure that we do have a very good service. And I think we've talked about this before, is that currently the town of Stony Plain, you know, I guess requests for approves a budget for 18 officers. That's almost one officer per 1,000 people within town of Stony Plain, which has been extremely well for us. I know other communities have been dropping it down to about one for every 750, one for 500, because again, it is a cost to have more officers. So you're absolutely right. I think it is a service level that if our council deems it necessary, we can add more resources to have more of the services that are provided by the Rcmp. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Okay. With that, that ends the presentation. Thank you, and have a good evening, and enjoy the rest of the night.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, members of council, I think that ends our presentations and delegations. We move on to business items. There are two policies that we need to talk about. So Let's take a 10-minute recess and we'll come back to it so that we don't have to take a break between those two business items. With that, we'll take a 10-minute. Thank you. All right, welcome back. We just had a recess, so moving on to business items on our agenda is we have two, 5.1 and 5.2. So 5.1 is the revenue taxation policy. Go ahead, administration.
Thank you, Your Worship. Nothing for me. I'll just turn it over to our General Manager of Corporate Services and I believe our Manager of Finance.
Thank you, Town Manager, to Your Worship and all of Council. We're here tonight to begin the regular review of the revenue and taxation policy. Most of the policy remains relevant, and in 1 minute I'll ask our Manager of Finance to walk Council through our current taxation policy history and challenges, as well as options and administration's recommendation. The main policy direction we're seeking from Council tonight is the split between the residential and non-residential classes. As you know, the taxation revenue has been approved in the corporate plan, but how it is collected between the classes is set by this policy. The policy is for information tonight with the plan to bring it back for final approval at the end of April prior to the tax bylaw being set in May. I now turn it over to our Manager of Finance to walk Council through the taxation policy background and recommendations.
Thank you and good evening, Your Worship and Council. As part of the cyclical policy review today, we will be going through our review and recommendations regarding the Revenue and Taxation Policy CFS 026. In general, the policy was still relevant in most aspects. The area we are recommending change is the taxation section of the policy, which we will present today. The intent of the Revenue and Taxation Policy is to meet the town's revenue needs in order to provide service delivery to our residents and businesses. The current policy implements a tax revenue split, whereas the residential class pays 80% of the tax revenue required and the non-residential class pays 20%. The intent of the policy was to favor the residential class. However, as assessment has shifted, this is no longer occurring, quantifying the need for change. Table 1 in the package depicts the historical trend of non-residential assessment increases, while residential assessment remaining relatively flat with a slight decline. As non-residential growth increases and residential assessment declines, it has increased the amount of tax revenue residents contribute under the current 80-20 revenue split. The chart clearly depicts the gap between the non-residential tax rate and the residential tax rate is narrowing. If this trend continues, it could mean rates are the same for non-residential and residential into the future. By applying the 80-20 taxation split, the difference in what residents versus non-residential properties has decreased by 0.32. This means in 2013, when the policy was implemented, non-residential properties were paying $1.47 for each dollar residents were paying. Projecting into 2021, that will decrease to $1.15 if the 80-20 policy remains. The changing factor is the assessment increase in the non-residential class versus an assessment decrease on the residential side. An alternate option to distributing tax revenue requirement is through a tax rate split. By implementing a tax rate split, changes in the market stay independent to the proportion of tax paid by each of these classes. It is important to consider the full context and impact on businesses. Residents pay for property taxes after federal and provincial income tax. Non-residential businesses are able to deduct property taxes from their before tax income. This results in a savings of property taxes in the range of 46 to 11%, depending on the business income and classification. In Table 4 of the document, it shows the after-tax savings for non-residential properties on average are paying only 82 cents for every dollar that residents are paying. Businesses are also able to transfer their expense through a good or service and are able to benefit from the town's services in producing income. Administration has evaluated comparators and the needs of the town of Stony Plain to understand potential options and the impacts they will have on residential and non-residential properties. Option 1 is to implement the average tax rate split of the Edmonton Metropolitan Region Board urban contributors, less the City of Edmonton. We feel this would be a relevant starting point. It has similarities in assessment base, competitiveness, and urban nature, which is why we have excluded the rules. We also excluded Edmonton due to the lack of comparability. By implementing an average tax rate split of the EMRB urban municipalities, this would move closer to equity between classes and removes the assessment change implications. The town could always maintain, as option 2, the 80-20 revenue split. However, would need to update the policy as to what class it should be favored. As mentioned, the current intent of the policy is not being realized. Also, as demonstrated in the previous slide, this option is volatile based on assessment. Option 3 would be to pause the tax rate split where it is currently at 1.18. This would favor the non-residential class. Through detailed analysis, administration would recommend implementing option 1 of a 1.36 tax rate split staged over 4 years. This would be parallel with the next policy review date. Although this will increase the amount of taxes non-residential class will pay into the future, this class has realized savings since the policy was implemented and had decreases in tax, while the residential side saw increases. This option would bring the split closer to where it was in 2013 when the policy was first implemented. The chart before you shows the tax split of the urban EMRB municipalities less Edmonton, of which the 2020 average is 1.36. It also displays the staging and the future placement of the tax rate split at the average in 2024. This demonstration shows implementation of the 1.36 tax split will still leave Stony Plain competitive within the EMRB urban comparators. It is important to note that others in the chart will also have movement regarding their tax rate split. Therefore, the average at the end of 4 years will be visited with the policy. Table 9 and 10 of the report that was included in the agenda package show further comparisons in regards to the entire EMRB region. The charts portray the same message that Stony Plain will generally maintain the placement within the EMRB regarding tax rates. Table 7 paints the picture of past and future impacts of implementing the 1.36 stage tax rate split to both residential average home as well as the median non-residential property. As mentioned, non-residential properties will see a future increase, where residential properties will see a decrease. Please note the table takes into consideration the approved 2021 tax increase per the corporate plan and holds the tax requisition at that amount into the future years. In conclusion, tax policies are very complex and typically reviewed frequently. By removing dependencies on assessment, the policy will see less volatility. The intent is we remain competitive in the region and ensure equitable tax distribution between the classes. The next steps within the policy is we will seek policy approval on April 26th, and the tax rate bylaw will be presented on May 10th. I'll now ask if there are any questions.
Okay, thank you much for the presentation to the manager. Members of council, any questions or comments regarding the presentation and the proposed next steps and the suggestion of going with option 1? Councillor Laurie, you're first.
Thank you, Your Worship. I really appreciate the information that's been presented, and I think one of the challenges that that I've identified with this is we talk about the businesses and businesses' ability to receive essentially or write off their property taxes, and we're comparing the non-residential to residential in this instance, but we also have a significant number of business in our community that would likely fall into the small business category that are home-based businesses, and those are charged at the residential taxation rate. So I'm just wondering, is there any consideration or is there any way that we look at that, and is there any type of calculation that we can do with that for those businesses which are paying the residential property rate, and the fact that they are also able to write off a portion of that property tax compared to a homeowner who does not operate a small business?
Good question, Councillor Laurie.
Through your worship to Councillor Laurie. We can look at that analysis. So just a few things. So falling into the small business category is based on revenue, and there's a few other things that fall in that classification as well. And so the town does not have the ability to know what the revenue is that small businesses or any of our businesses realize in a year. And so that deduction would be based on that. And in regards to the home-based businesses charged at the residential rate, should there be, discussion regarding this, we can pull that data, and there is ability to have different classifications regarding taxation.
Thank you. I would be interested to see that information, because I think, when we're talking about this, we're using the justification is that these businesses are able to write off a portion of the property tax that the town charges, therefore they are not personally responsible for it. And so I think it's a little bit unfair to segment out businesses who own commercial property versus businesses who operate in a residential property. And as you mentioned, there's no way for us to know revenue, because I'm sure we have some very successful small businesses with home addresses that do not have commercial addresses. So I would be interested to see that information and understand how we might be able to apply a policy that would be fair, a split between residential and business.
Thank you. Maybe that's something that staff can find, or maybe it's not readily available. Any comments from administration?
Your worship, we can take it away. I think it's a good question, but again, this is what makes the taxation policy complex, is a lot of the factors that we'd like to consider. We don't have readily access to that information, which makes it hard for us to implement, to define those criteria, and to monitor ongoing. So we'll look into it a little bit further, but I guess I'm feeling a little hesitation of it may be hard to define, but we can definitely think about it, and when we bring back the policy, comment on it further.
Thank you very much. Any other questions from members of council? I'll check. Okay, see, nobody has chimed in and sent me a message, so I'll ask a question then. Going back to one of those slides where you showed the residential rate and the non-residential rate coming closer together, and council's passed a policy about having 80-20 split back in 2013, so it has effectively been in what, 6 years now, 7 years. Can you explain the reason why that's narrowing and not staying flat at an 80-20 split?
Thank you, Your Worship, through you and to all of council as well. So there are two different ways that a tax policy can be applied. One is based on a tax revenue requirement, which is how our current policy is. So for example, our current policy states that the total revenue that the town requires, which is approved through the corporate plan annually, which is approximately 17.7 million, of that 17.7 million taxation requirement, 80% must be paid by residential and 20% must be paid by non-residential. So by applying it on the taxed revenue, and we've seen increase in assessment on the non-residential properties. And so what that means is the assessment is higher. So then when it's divided out into a tax rate, it actually decreases the tax rate. So some of this assessment would be from new properties and growth. And so basically by increasing our non-residential assessment, we have now had the non-residential properties paying still that same 20% portion, but it's split now amongst more properties. And so as a result, the tax rate has declined for that class. And the opposite has happened for residential. So the residential assessment has actually gone down, which means that now the divider is less, and so the tax rate is higher. By changing it to a tax rate split, it takes out the revenue portion, and it says based on the full revenue complement, for every dollar that the residential property pays, the non-resident will pay X amount. So it will always stay the same. The gap between the two tax rates will always stay the same, because we're always saying, for example, $1.36 versus $1. It will always be $1.36 versus $1. It would never fluctuate.
Okay, thank you for that explanation, and that does make sense. And actually, that kind of bodes well for what the town of Stony has been doing over the last 8 years as we started our economic development policies and trying to build a climate to attract new businesses to come to Stony Plain and to expand the existing ones that we do have. So based on the non-residential assessment, it shows that that has been growing and exceeding what the resident assessment is. So I think our economic development staff are doing an excellent job. Councillor Matties, go ahead, you have a question?
Thank you, Your Worship. Basically, just my question is quite simple with regards to the fluctuations in market rates of residential versus non-residential. So by having the first option, that will eliminate that issue. So we're just basically looking at one calculation for a rate that doesn't have an impact with regards to the market values, in terms of the differences between, like as we said, the non-registered may be going down, and the non-residential will be going up, and the residential will be going down. So I just want to confirm that.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Councillor Matties. That is correct. So by having a tax policy based on a tax rate split, it does eliminate the volatility of the assessment, increases or decreases, as that split will always remain the same. Whereas you can see on the other slide here, by having the 80-20, the split has significantly decreased down to where we are currently at the 1.18.
Thank you. And I do, just one little comment, I do very much like staggering it over a period of 4 years in terms of increasing the rate. I guess one comment I would have with regards to the average being the urbans of the Edmonton Metro Regional Board, or the Edmonton Metro region, how that would impact maybe our competitiveness in terms of attracting businesses to this community. Would we ever potentially consider maybe 5% less than, or 4 or 5% less, which would bring us to, like, for example, a 1.3 as opposed to 1.36? So have you thought of that?
Administration.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Councillor Matties and all of Council. We absolutely have had that thought as well. We know that the average will be changing, which is why we're recommending that this be reviewed within 4 years. We also are aware of two of the comparators on the chart that have passed bylaws, text bylaws that, or tax policies, my apologies, tax policies that will increase their ratio of the total EMRB average, which is 1.75. And so at the end of the 4 years, the average we know will be up higher because of those two moving up to the 1.75.
Okay, thank you for that, and thank you for the questions, Councillor Matties. Those are good questions, and thank you for shedding a little light on making sure that you know, the tax policy is stable, and having a tax rate model makes that stable, so it doesn't the evaluations of properties do not affect the tax rate. So thank you. Moving to Councillor Meyer, please go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just for clarity, resident versus non-resident, they pay the same for their utilities, their garbage, their water, wastewater, garbage, all of that, correct?
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Councillor Meyer and all of Council. Utilities is charged based on a usage, and so whatever that customer uses is what they are charged. So it would be equitable between residential or non-residential. There are no different rates between those two.
Okay, so just to follow up to that, so besides those, what services would a non-residential property face or incur that would, you know, justify their paying more for the tax that goes beyond sort of services that everybody pays, I should say.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Myers. This is a great question, and we did a lot of research on this, and unfortunately there's a lot of research on this as well, and we had a lot of discussion regarding this. And so, I mean, from a very general to look for is what services do non-residents use versus residential, and where do they differ? I mean, the big ones that are our largest costs for the municipality that non-residential properties would utilize would be infrastructure, policing, fire protection, all of those sorts of things. The other thing to consider is that non-residential or business properties do bring a lot more traffic into the town, to their storefront, rather than just, you know, 1 or 2 cars coming to a residential business. You might have hundreds or thousands of cars visiting non-residential their businesses, therefore taxing on the infrastructure and, you know, potential for more car accidents and those sorts of things.
Your Worship, it's a town manager, and I'll make a few comments along the lines of that particular question. And I would preface them, Your Worship, and the rest of Council, that you know, these are, I guess, comments that would be backed up by, you know, I mean, over the course of time, the benefits that accrue to a commercial or industrial enterprise that don't accrue to an individual. So, as an individual or a resident or a citizen, so to speak, the services that are provided by a municipality accrue in certain ways. You know, you would say quality of life, you know, walking on trails, enjoying time with your family. I mean, there's those sorts of benefits that accrue. a commercial or an industrial enterprise would be seen to have those plus the further benefit that the investments made by the municipality can, I wouldn't say always will, but can benefit their bottom line, so to speak. And again, I wouldn't say that, Your Worship and the rest of council, that there is a easy or clear line to draw from one to the other, but that will be part of the perspective as to why would there be a differing rate from commercial to residential.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Meyer, anything else?
No, thank you.
Okay. And move on to Councilor Plechko.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Just a bit of a comment. Not that long ago, I can remember sitting around the table with many of our with our commercial developers and business people, making comments about our roads within our communities, how bad that was hindering their businesses and keeping people away. So infrastructure that we put in the town brings a lot of possibilities for the local businesses. So kind of like Tom said, the stuff that we put in place improves their ability to do business at a much more cost for the town, proportionate to what a residential town would need. So just a bit of a comment there.
Thank you, Councilor Plechko. Anybody else? Okay. Seeing that there's no other messages that have come in, so we'll move on. I think there is, as outlined in the next steps, it'll be coming back to council for debate on April 16th, I believe is what I saw. Oh, April 26th. And then the rate bylaw gets passed in May before all the tax notices go out. So with that, I need a motion to accept this for information. So I'll move on to Councillor Meyer, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. That we accept the tax, what's the official name of this? Tax levy, sorry. I'm just waiting for it to come up here.
The revenue and taxation policy.
Taxation policy for information. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Meyer. I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Mr. Mayor, I see 6 hands in favor.
6 hands in favor. Okay. I guess all those opposed?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I don't think you voted.
Oh, was my hand? Let me see. Sorry, I thought I had pushed that little hand that's way up down.
There, I can see it now. 7
Okay.
hands in favor, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Okay, I guess those are not opposed to accepting for information because it is just accepting for information. My apologies. Moving on to 5.2, which is the fiscal sustainability framework. Go ahead, administration.
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, it's the town manager, and we'll just ask our same presenters, our general manager and our manager of finance, to speak to this matter as they wish.
Thank you, Town Manager. To Your Worship and to all of Council, we're here tonight to continue the Fiscal Sustainability Framework project with a kickoff for Phase 2. As Council knows and remembers, this framework was added to the Council Strategic Plan as a key action under the Governance and Partners pillar. It will ensure the town has financial capacity to meet its strategic goals and continue to deliver into services into the future. This is done by long-term planning, forecasting, and a common understanding of the interrelatedness of fiscal strategies, so all aspects are considered and understood as decisions are made. So in 2013, Council approved a suite of 7 financial policies of what we just discussed and laid a strong groundwork for the fiscal framework. The intent of the framework is to formalize the town's approach to financial decision-making and continuous long-term planning through agreed upon principles, strategies, and processes. Once it's complete, it will work as a reference document in decision-making with questions for administration and council to consider under each strategy area. As a reminder, the key principles of the framework will be based upon our sustainability, flexibility, and minimizing vulnerability. These are the most significant indicators of a government's financial condition, and those were based on a public sector statement of recommended practice. And the public sector board is the board that also sets the accounting standards and is quite a reputable group. The supplemental principles in the framework will be the strategic and corporate priorities, efficiency, equitability or fairness, and transparency. I would state that many of these principles are already considered in the decisions council makes, but this document will help frame and formalize the considerations to keep council, admin, and the public aligned. As you know, there's often competing priorities with different implications, and unfortunately never enough funding to complete everything that is wanted to get done. So in phase 1 in 2020, council tackled the investments, debt management, utility self-sustaining strategy, and capital funding strategy. As well as internally, we worked on strengthening our department planning and environmental scanning. We'll continue that work into 2021, along with bringing asset management and service levels to council in May. These are very broad, big topics that the town is just starting to tackle. You've been hearing about asset management, so you'll start to hear more about service levels. And this framework will help to set questions and considerations that we consider as those come forward to council into the future. In June, we will bring off-site levies, which will work in conjunction with the bylaw and policy being updated by planning and engineering. And then finally in July, we'll bring the reserves and reserve fund management along with the policy around that area for council consideration. The goal is then to bring all of these strategies into one big framework document that will be presented for approval to council in the fall, in September, and be used as a resource going into the future. We can answer any questions that council may have about the planned work or about where this is headed. Other than that, we can conclude our presentation on this tonight.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Just for visual, is it possible to get the page 36 on the screen just so that we can see the fiscal sustainability strategy, so we can see it all there at one time?
Yes, let me try to do that.
Thank you. Okay, while you're doing that, I'll move over to Councillor Meyer has a couple questions. Go ahead, Councillor Meyer.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just two. In the background information on the sheet, I was wondering if administration could maybe just expand on it's the second paragraph where we're talking to committing to cultivate a strong organizational structure. If in that statement, if I can read, like, would I be correct in assuming that when we say strong organizational structure, that we are looking at I don't know how best to word this. We want to hold on to employees. Is that can I read that in that sentence, or am I kind of off base there?
Okay, thank you. Administration.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Meyer. I mean, that is part of a strong organizational structure. So there's many things, I guess, that would play into that, and it's under the governance pillar of the strategic plan. So it was one of the items under that, and then under that was a key action of strengthen the fiscal sustainability framework, which would also relate to a strong organization. You know, that the finances are taken care of, that all these things are considered, and long-term planning, and you know what services we're delivering and how those are delivered and how those are funded. But yeah, it's a very broad statement, and this was just one of the key actions identified in the last strategic plan. Hopefully that helps bring some clarity, but let me know if I didn't answer that.
Thank you. Councilor Meyer?
Yeah, so if I just repeat what I think I kind of heard there is, I can't necessarily read that into that sentence, although that is a part of a strong organization. Would I be correct in sort of rewording my thoughts that way?
That's how I read it. Thank you.
Okay, and then just another one, if I could.
Yeah, go ahead.
On the same page at the bottom, we talk about the principle. It's a principles-based document. We list the 3: financial, sustainability, flexibility, and then we also talk about supplemental principles. I'm curious specifically about the supplemental principles. How do we measure those?
Question, go ahead.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Meyer. So it's a good question. I think the intent of the framework is really, like you said, more principle based. So I find it useful to look at the questions and to think about it as we're making decisions. So I mean, part of the the strategic and corporate priorities, we have process in place, and we rank those, and council debates them. So there are ways that there are, I guess, more measurement type things around these principles. But it's more some of them will compete against one another too, and that's part of council's job and administration's job to bring forward good, well-rounded recommendations, and for council to debate them and say, which one is more important in this particular decision that council's making. And some services we provide, we'll want really efficient services. That's the most important. Where on other services, it's not about the efficiency, it's about the quality of life and the service provided. So it's considering those things, and this framework puts some, broad statements around those to consider. And some I would say, like, transparency is just, it's transparency, it's important because it is public funding. And so just checking all of ourselves to make sure that we are being transparent and disclosing all the information to the public so they understand it as well. So those are a few examples. Hopefully that helps a little bit, but it's a good question.
Thank you. Anything else, Councillor Meyer?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Thank you. Move on to Councillor Matties. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question is surrounding the concept of resilience. And I'm just going to share a bit of a definition, which is the practice of designing things to endure future physical, social, and economic shocks and stresses. And secondly, resilience is the capacity of a system, so referring to the capacity of a system, city or economy, to deal with change and continue to develop. And my question is, because I can't remember all the detail of the framework that I've seen so far, is resilience, I guess, captured in terms of a notion of financial capacity and future vision to be able to adjust and continue to develop? Looking at resilient being slightly different than, like, for financial sustainability of systems that ensures that we will be able to grow and function in the future. But they're different definitions, and I'm just wondering, does this framework capture the resilience component?
Yes. Thank you.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Matties. When you were reading it, I was reading the principles around the sustainability. I think they do overlap a lot. And again, this is the foundation here is focused on the fiscal side of things. So maybe when you're talking resiliency, it's that broader picture, which, the fiscal framework will support the broader picture. I think it does look at those aspects of is what the town has committed to provide for services. You know, how are we going to fund those things into the future? Can our residents and businesses afford to pay for those things? You know, what are the things that we should be thinking of now around reserves, and what amount of debt can we take on? All those things. And that's why, you know, I really like this framework in that it's you see the circle in front of you of how they all interrelate, and a number of those things come into play. So like the capital funding piece would come in, as well as maybe the debt piece comes in when you're looking at capital projects, and maybe the offsite levies too, if abortion can be funded that way. So I think all of those things are looked at together. So I think it does cover that, but maybe when you're talking resiliency, you're talking larger. And I know there's, you know, other initiatives happening within the organization, the Mayor's Task Force on Resiliency, and maybe this plays into some of their future recommendations and how do we continue to tie the strategies together going forward. I think this is the first step on the fiscal strategy, and as the other ones come into play, definitely integration would be important.
Thank you. Councillor Matthews?
Yes, I was definitely talking about the financial capacity, and I think it does too. I think that overall, that it is part of an overall process we have to look at in terms of resiliency. But I do like it. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Matthews. Okay, and that is all the questions that needs to speak. So last call, any more comments or questions from members of council? See none, thank you very much, administration, for the presentation. And again, appreciate the work that's been done so far into getting this to council. As you mentioned earlier, that this is a overall strategy that's going to get the town situated into a better position in terms of sustainability and long-term effects. I think Councillor Maddie has mentioned a couple times, along with Councillor Bennett, about resiliency, how well as a municipality we're going to be able to resist and be resilient to the next pandemic, next economic downturn, the next environmental happenings that might happen in the community. So it is good that administration is looking at all the policies and making sure that they fit into the criteria of this strategic plan, and how it is to make sure that we're resilient going into the future. With that, I need a motion, so let's go to Councillor Maddie since you're last up.
That Town Council accept the Fiscal Sustainability Framework update for information.
Thank you, Councillor Matthews. I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Mr. Mayor, I see 6 hands in favor.
Did I forget to vote this time? Okay, so 7. Thank you. That's passed. Thank you. I look forward to the rest of the information coming back to council. Moving on to council discussion and council information items. Members of council, anything to share with our colleagues on council or administration? Today we'll start with Councillor Meyer. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a shout out to our Public Works. I made a few observations the last couple of weeks. One about a hole in our main street that was promptly filled, and as well as one regarding a disintegrating path that I think they patched it as best that can be done. So I want to shout out and say thank you there. I am just curious about the patch job on Main Street, as the sidewalk also still has to be repaired, and the patch is already kind of caving in a bit. I'm just curious if that is like a temporary fix for now, or if more things are going to be done to straighten that out.
Good comments, good question. Administration, anything to comment on? I believe that's temporary, we do just use asphalt to do a repair, but when can we expect the sidewalk to be replaced?
Thank you, Your Worship. Our General Manager of Planning and Infrastructure isn't with us tonight. I will pass that question along to him and just have a response sent out via email. But typically, if we're doing any sort of repair work, you know, through the colder months of the year or early spring like now, I mean, that's generally going to be a temporary fix, not the final fix. But I'll have him clarify.
Okay. Thank you very much. Anything else, Councillor Meyer?
No, thank you very much.
Okay. Councillor Mattis, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I also wanted to say a good word for our public works. I saw the cleaning the streets this morning, and everything is looking very, very good in Stony Plain. Just a couple of things I'd like to note that I've been on a few webinars over the last week. Two of them were put on by the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce. One was James Reja, who is the Alberta representative to the U.S., and he talked about the economic opportunities and some of the challenges for Alberta in dealing with our neighbors to the south. But definitely wonderful to see that we have somebody working so hard and somebody that's very knowledgeable. So, you know, basically advocating for us. Secondly, I listened to the Minister of Energy, Sonia Savage, and she provided a great presentation regarding the challenges and opportunities of traditional oil and gas, but also talked about new clean energy opportunities such as hydrogen and geothermal, renewables in Alberta. She talked about minerals, our rare earth opportunities, as well as opportunities in the petrochemical area. So I was so very pleased to listen to her because she's so optimistic about the opportunities in Alberta, and so that was good. Then I listened to a Alberta Council presentation on the Alberta Disaster Recovery Program. And I'm very glad to hear that our administration is aware of the changes that will be happening and that we will be getting a presentation to Council in the spring of 2021 on that. And finally, I attended the Heritage Ag Society board meeting, as well as the Growth and Commerce Committee meetings, and everybody's doing really, really well in terms of these boards or committees, and that we're definitely moving forward on initiatives. The multi is got their strategic plan is just about completed, as well as they're planning to have the restaurant open up and with a new company. So I'm very pleased about that. And then our Growth and Commerce Committee, we're working on things like business co-working space and incubator, just looking at the opportunities or the possibilities with that as well. So overall, that's all I have to report, but very good information that we are receiving.
Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor Mattis. Moving on to Councillor Bennett. Go ahead, Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple of things. First of all, a question, and then a couple of updates. So my question is, you know, every day I walk by the retaining wall at the Meridian Reservoir, and every day that retaining wall looks like it's bulging just a little bit more. Do we have any immediate plans to remediate that wall?
Okay. Thank you. Administration.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Councillor Bennett. I think I will ask our General Manager of Planning and Infrastructure just to respond via email. I believe I have some ideas, but I don't want to, frankly, be wrong. So, good question, and I'll have him respond directly to Council on that.
Okay. Councillor Bennett, go ahead.
Councillor Bennett? Is that what you mean?
Yes. Any other questions, comments?
Yeah. So then I just wanted to report that when it comes to the Mayor's Task Force on Resilient Communities, so we have almost finished all of our presentations, and we will soon be gathering all that information in order to um, in order to um, work on the recommendations that we want to go to council. So one of our last presentations is going to be on April 27th, and that is the CEIP, CEIP, which is the environmental economy um, kind of process that some municipalities have been going through. And I've asked our recording secretary to send that invitation out to all of council. I think that is something that we will all be interested in. So I hope that you can make some time in your schedules. That will be on April 27th. I believe right away at 5:15 that will take place. So please attend that. And then I did just receive an email according to the Tri-Leisure Center manager. Uh, we have gone back into stage 1 of our COVID regulations, and it looks like nothing is really confirmed, but it looks like starting on Friday, we're going to be back to um, individual workouts on your own are no longer allowed. It will be pre-booked one-on-one and one-on household training only. It appears that private swim lessons will be allowed to continue. And of course, our online classes will also continue to be offered. Youth team sports and household bookings seem to be able to continue, but that will need to be confirmed as there is a bit of conflicting info between the announcement and what is on the website currently. So our team there at the Tri-Leisure Center is working to contact people and get out all the communication that needs to happen with those changes that are going to be taking place starting this Friday. I think that was all I had, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you much, Councillor Bennett. And then moving on to Councillor Pletchko. Go ahead.
Yes, Your Worship. Nice to see multiple things happening around our community. I'm just wondering if Public Works has had the opportunity to put grader blades on and get the graders out of the shop yet for the past winter here. Seems Range Road 12 has about the best washing board machine road in the town of Stony Plain. I've had a chance last week to drive every road in the town, and it seems to me that Range Road 12, if we could get a grader out on it and a bit of a schedule for 2021, it would be a great opportunity for us to do that. Other than that, I think I'm looking forward to some of the road work that needs to be done and finalized within the community. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Pletchko. And I believe the General Manager of Planning Infrastructure is not on tonight, so maybe we'll get an email update. Is that correct, General Manager?
That's correct, Your Worship. I don't want to sound like a broken record. He would have been a popular guy if he was here tonight, but I gave him the night off. I didn't think there was too many planning and infrastructure items on the agenda, so he had the night off, but I'll pass that along to him as well.
Thank you very much. Councillor Laurie?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, just a couple of comments, and some of them probably would have been for the General Manager of Planning and Infrastructure as well. So he's dodged a good bullet tonight, I think. first is just in regards to the early spring weather that we've been having. I mean, obviously it's fantastic, but I think what it also does is it gives our residents a little bit of false hope when it comes to some of our projects like Main Street and 779. And so I know I spoke with the town manager, but I also just wanted to reiterate that, I'm looking to start seeing some of those schedules coming out. I know there were some pre-construction meetings that were occurring, and I'd like to see some communication out to our residents sooner rather than later, so they understand when construction will get re-going on those things. I also have a retaining wall that I wanted to bring up today, one that is in front of, I believe it is the Sonora apartment building along 44th Avenue. It's done with landscape style bricks, and I'm not sure whether this would be the responsibility of the apartment building or whether this would be the responsibility of the town of Stony Plain, whose property it's on. But the retaining wall has been propped up for several years, and it is continuing to fail. The bricks are starting to fall onto the public sidewalk, and it's creating quite a problem there. So I'm hoping that administration can take a look into that.
Your worship, sorry, I'll jump in on that one because I do have some information on that one. So, yeah, that was brought to our attention through the winter months, as I understand. And there has been some action taken. The landowner has been notified. It is their responsibility. And I believe we are pursuing that somewhat through our community standards bylaw at this point in time, Your worship. So I'm not sure of exactly when or the fix that will be made, but we have put the landowner on notice that needs to be rectified in some manner satisfactory to the town, is I guess the way I would put it. So that one does have some action behind it at this point that I'm aware of.
Excellent. I'm very happy to hear that, and hopefully they heed that notice and action it shortly. I did just want to say, along Councillor Bennett's comments, I believe the restrictions on the gyms was effective as of midnight tonight. I think the only thing that was effective Friday was the restaurants, but again, these announcements never seem to come with an ounce of clarity, so I would wait until official notice is received and communicated out. But obviously we're all aware that unfortunately there has been a step back in the restrictions. Great to see, though, that our golf course is opening up this week. It was awesome to see that email this afternoon. And I also wanted to give a quick commendation to the town. It seems like there was a little bit of a glitch in the utility bills, and received a couple of messages and notices that some residents were pretty unhappy as their bills were double the amount they expected and their last month's payment hadn't been shown. Personally, I received one that was the same, and I think within 45 minutes I had a corrected bill in my inbox without even contacting anybody. And it sounds like they were able to provide answers to anybody who contacted them in a very, very quick turnaround. So just a kudos again to the administrative team for that. Other than that, I've been enjoying the sunshine on our trails and getting out for quite a few walks, and like I said, noticing that things seem to be in pretty good shape, and encourage our residents to register for Pitch In Week. It looks like we've got quite a bit of debris out there, from shingles from the windstorms to the ever so loved masks all around town. So hopefully we'll get a good participation in that, and we can have a nice, beautiful community for the spring and summer to enjoy. Thanks. That's all for me this evening, Your Worship.
Thank you much, Councillor Laurie. Deputy Mayor, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just two brief items. Easter weekend we just had passed, and I think that was an excellent weekend for our office, the other office I work in. I heard nothing but positives. The people really enjoyed having the 4-day long weekend in many, many businesses. The weather was outstanding, and we were hearing a lot about COVID, the downsides of it, the effects of it, the mental health. So I really think that Easter weekend past was a really positive thing for almost everybody. Inspector Loken's report I thought was very good. I've always believed that Stony Plain is a very safe town to live in. We looked at some of his numbers there. Yeah, if you go from 2 to 4, well, that's a high percentage number. 1 to 2, that's a high percentage. But if you get percentages of things like at 15 or 20% increases, but your numbers are in the low 20s to start off with, then you really have a major problem. And I don't see a problem here whatsoever. And I'm thankful for it. And those are my comments.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Maybe just a couple questions for admin staff, and I think our General Manager of Planning Infrastructure is not here, so maybe we'll get an update via email later on as well. And I think Councillor Laurie mentioned this with the early spring weather. A lot of people are talking about line painting. We usually contract that out. If administration can just send us an email about when that is planned for, so that we can kind of pass those messages along to our residents, as well as construction. Usually this time of year, our team, our staff here have construction meetings, both with our own construction projects and the projects of other transportation. Can also be administration provide a little update on that as well.
Yeah, Your Worship. You know, I mean, we're involved in those. As we speak, I know that we were intending to do a downtown, a formal update down on the downtown project in the chambers formally, in the near future. I believe even April 12th, if I recall. But yeah, we can certainly start understanding the project timings and getting that out to the community. I do, Your Worship, a couple other comments I'll make, I guess, just generally on spring. I noticed that this particular year with I think somewhat lack of moisture to a degree, but also a rather slow melt. We haven't seen as much water concerns and problems coming in the door, or coming in the phone lines, if you want to call it that, Your Worship. So I think on that end, we kind of made it through that spring melt without too many challenges throughout the community. So I think that was a good thing. And yeah, it's getting into early April. Golf course and construction will be the topics du jour, I'm sure, for the next a few weeks, and we will get some info into council, and we'll get some info out to the public.
Okay. Thank you very much. And just another question with what Councillor Bennett said regarding kind of the tightening of the provincial regulations, going back to stage 1 on a lot of issues. How does that affect the town Stony Plain operations?
Your Worship, I know our General Manager of Community Protective Services is in the meeting, and I'm sure he can add a little bit further, but I would say, two things. One, we've gotten, I don't want to say used to, but maybe that is the right word, for moving in and out of restrictions. That's one general comment I would add. The other thing that I would reiterate that I heard Councillor Bennett speak to was, the announcements are made on one day, and sometimes it's a couple, 2-3 days before we really see the impacts or the understandings or the clarifications that do come. I'll stop there, Your Worship, and I'll see if our General Manager wishes to add anything further.
Your Worship, members of council, just a couple quick things that immediately jumped out with the restrictions or the measures that were announced today, going backwards. Definitely the restaurant at the golf course will be impacted, as all restaurants are going curbside effective Friday. So we're projecting to open the course on Friday, so that will affect that. Essentially, we can, consider that 10th tee as a curbside pickup of sorts. So that should help us out once that opens. And secondary is the performance piece has been suspended until further notice. So definitely that will impact some of our rentals over at the community center. And we'll continue to look at, as the CAO described, the guidance that comes out in the next 2 days to see if there are the further impacts. But those are two right off the top that stood out to me as definite impacts to the town and some of our facilities immediately.
Thank you very much for that. And it looks like Councillor Meyer messaged me, and he has something to update. Go ahead, Councillor Meyer.
Thank you, Your Worship. So just in the last moments, I've received an email from the YRL, and I've fired off an email to our director just to confirm. But with rolling back to stage 1, libraries apparently must close, but can continue to provide online services, which I would fully expect our library to continue. But as soon as I hear confirmation for sure from Mark, I'll let you guys know.
Thank you.
Your Worship, just to confirm, Councillor Meyer, that's correct. They did announce today, sorry, my apologies, that libraries must close until further notice, but can do the curbside and online continue to do that service.
Thank you. Councillor Laura, you had a question regarding one of the comments from the general manager.
Yeah, thank you. Just in regards to the restaurant at the golf course, and actually this might apply to some other restaurants in the community. So my understanding, and again, this is with a threat of uncertainty just based on these just coming out this afternoon. My understanding is that restaurants must close for indoor in-person dining, but are allowed to remain open for outdoor patio dining. So in pertinence to the golf course itself, I'm wondering if we're going to consider, obviously we have a great patio there, if we're going to consider operating the restaurant for patio service. And then as well, we have some restaurants in town which have their own patios, but we also have some restaurants who do not. Is there anything that we can do for those restaurants that do not? Is there some consideration or something that we can do as a temporary measure to allow them to have some sort of outdoor dining during this time of restriction?
Good question.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I can speak to that in a manner of sorts. So, yeah, as to patio use, I think what we've tried to do over the course of the last year, whenever the restrictions were moving around, was let it be known to the local industry that we would be more than willing to discuss with them or work with them on just that, finding a way to allow for some sort of patio use if that's what they chose. I know, and again, I would only speak that we didn't, I didn't see a report that we spoke to each and every one, but the ones that we did have contact with didn't seem to have much interest in it, for their own reasons, one way or the other. But I can certainly have our staff do some more outreach on that to the business community, and if there's something that they would like us to look at, please come in and we'll do our best to make it work, which in whatever way we have. Typically it's a land use issue, like a LUB issue. Formally, that's where the regs would be on patio uses, adjacent to buildings and so on and so forth. But I'll stop there. Administratively, we've always did some of that outreach, put it out there that we would be more than willing to listen and talk and act if need be, but we didn't get a lot of feedback or uptake on that dialogue.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And it looks like we have a lot of things to work through and weed out to see what the actual government wants us to do. So, okay, those are the end of my comments and questions that I had for administration. So thank you very much, administration, for the packages and presentations. They are very informative and allows council to have a good understanding of what we need to focus on in terms of governance, and look forward to reviewing the policies that are coming forward in terms of fiscal sustainability and the revenue taxation policy. With that, everyone, please stay safe, as we can see that our numbers are continuing to balloon over the last few days. So hopefully that we're able to get those numbers down and bend the curve back down so that we can reopen. With that, please take care and have a good evening.